Hello and welcome to CS264. This is Lecture 12 and Lesson 1. I'm John Keating, and today I want to talk to you about making UML class diagrams using PlantUML. Now, we saw lots of examples of class diagrams in the lecture the last day, and we saw pretty much everything we needed to know about how the various objects and classes are created and how they relate to each other by way of dependencies and associations, aggregations. We saw about generalizations, we saw about abstract classes, and we also saw a little bit about what happens inside the class. So here, for example, we have a class called circle, which extends a class called shape, and we see that there are public methods here, and we see that there are private variables or attributes in here. So these member variables all have privacy. There's also a protected one, which we don't have here as well, but we'll come to that a little bit later. So what we want to do is, we don't want to have to draw these manually if we can at all. We want to quickly be able to use them in order to be able to refer to them a little bit later when we want to examine the actual code and the designs. So I did tell you in class that it's a good idea to start with the design, write your code, and then generate the design again from the code so that you can compare your original design like this and the actual design associated with the app that you've developed. It gives you a sense of how close your code is, your developed code is, or your solution is to the design. And that's the kind of thing I want you to be able to do for this particular module. So we are interested in software design patterns, and all of these patterns can be described using UML. I'd usually ask you to implement a version of that pattern, and then I want you to be able to reassure me and to convince yourself, of course, that this has all been done correctly from a design perspective anyway, and that you have implemented the classes and the interrelationships between the classes as expected by the design pattern. I don't want you manually generating these at all, of course, so let's have a look at how we might do this in some automated way. So really, I want you to start looking at PlantUML as a key tool in your solutions for this problem. So PlantUML is a package that allows you to be able to generate and describe UML diagrams using a textual language. So for example, here is a very simple description of a diagram here, and you can see it generates this nice diagram. So a nice textual language generates the visual language. I think I may have one saved, I don't. Let's copy one from somewhere else. Let's copy this diagram here from this wonderful article on creating UML diagrams using PlantUML by Rachel Apple. She uses some JetBrains tools to do this, not Visual Studio Code, but it's very, very useful. It's certainly worth reading. Let's paste the code in here and let's see what happens. It may generate an example for us. So here we really quickly were able to generate using the PlantUML online service at plantuml.com in order to be able to convert this textual description into a nice diagram that we could use anywhere, Okay, how do we make it work with Visual Studio Code? So I have my Visual Studio Code open here, and this is the standard Bob and Alice example that we saw on the front page from the PlantUML documentation, and I want to be able to generate my UML diagram from this. So in order to do that, we need to install some packages. So I've installed a couple of packages here. We only really need one, but I've installed PlantUML, which is a full PlantUML toolkit for use within Visual Studio Code, and the PlantUML previewer, which is the one that we will use essentially to generate our diagrams. You can see information on these by clicking through to the PlantUML language service in the Visual Studio Marketplace. We can look at this previewer here, of course, as well. And I have this one installed as well, which is a C# to PlantUML. And that allows us to be able to generate UML code describing the classes that are present in our C# files. And then once we have, so it's a two-step process. So once we have our C#, we can generate the PlantUML, and then we can generate the diagrams. So it's possible to generate a design from our code, and we can compare that with the original design. So let's go back here. So I've installed these. Okay, you can install them. You can search for them in the marketplace, and then you can install them. It's quite straightforward to be able to do. If you want to install the PlantUML, you're going to have to do a little bit more work because you have to have Java installed in the machine, and you have to have GraphViz. I installed all these fairly straightforwardly with Homebrew, but I'm a Mac user, and that's the way I do those things. Okay, so we want to click on View. We have our example loaded here. We'll click on View and the command palette. And I recently used this one, but you could search for it. We want to preview the current diagram. So let's click to preview the current diagram. See, it's processing. That means it's taking this diagram, sending it to the online service, and returning the result here. So we have this box as we would have expected. So this all looks really nice. So let's have a look at a couple of other diagrams that I've created. Let's look at the one that we saw from the online class example. Okay, this is the one we saw from Rachel Apple and from the JetBrains blog, and some really nice tools from JetBrains for .NET and other processing, of course, as well. So I'd recommend those. So here we have a class that's described. Here we have some protected members here as part of a class person. We have some public members as part of a class employee. We have a class and another public member, and we have no private members, but we have a public method here as well, in addition to these attributes here. These describe the class, and these then describe the relationship between those classes. We can see that employee extends person, professor extends employee, and student extends person. And we can preview this as well. Let's have a look at the preview. So we generate a preview from this one, and here we have the diagram as we would expect. So it's a beautiful diagram, and we can see the various notations in place here. So a circle is for a public data member, and a closed circle for a method. Protected members have diamonds and so forth, and we see our generalization, our subclasses are all in place. Works really nicely, so I'd certainly recommend that. We talked in class, for example, about the difference between associations and dependencies. So associations really, here we talked about a player having some dice, and we saw this example from this Stack Overflow article and from this article on Leroy's Rules, WordPress, and another blog here on association versus dependency and aggregation. And we could see here how an association is where a class uses, has some dice. A player has some dice, and we saw a player uses some dice, rolls some dice, calls a method, and we can draw this as well. So we can regenerate all of these diagrams ourselves. So let's have a look at this one. Again, we preview it, and you have to click into the diagram in order to be able to get the preview. Otherwise, you get a little error up here, and you can see here we have the two examples that we had here, but it doesn't tell us very much. So the example that was on Stack Overflow doesn't do much. So I've added this little extra piece myself to show you, so you can uncomment this to have a peek. And we have a look at the classes, and we have a look at these classes here, and we should get an update on the diagram here, and we can see yes. So now we've introduced this dice class as well. I wrote it here, and then I say that we talk about the association, and we can use the same notation and the dashed line for the dependencies rather than the associations that will be here. Okay. So it looks very nice. So I have another one where we have a very simple one here, where we have a driver, class car, and we have a driver drives a car has wheels, and the car and person. So this is a very nice diagram here. We could also say, for example, that a driver extends person, for example, if we wanted as well. So this shows just a nice example, and we can take this away, and we can see straight away we get a nice update. And we get that diagram changes as well. So it's very, very nice, very straightforward, very easy to use this. Okay, so I love PlantUML. I certainly recommend that you use it. So the next step that we want to be able to do is let's hide those for a minute, and let's have a look at a C program. So here's a C# program, and let's get rid of those PlantUML diagrams. Let's save it. Let's get rid of this one and save it. So now we have a very simple here. So we have a class here, person, and we've written this. So it has a constructor, and a couple of methods. And I've taken this one from the James W. Cooper example from that 2002 book, which I thought was really, really interesting to use a book that's nearly 20 years old, but it still works. So it's quite nice. So what I want to do is I want to be able to generate a class diagram for this. So if we go ahead and have a look at our command palette again, and we try to preview the current diagram, we should get some errors here because it's not a PlantUML, so we won't do this. But what we need to do really is we need to actually generate some PlantUML from this. Okay, so we use this one in order to be able to do this. Okay, so we're going to be able to generate the PlantUML, and here we generated it. So person. And here's our program.puml. And now this was generated automatically for us by that method. It was very quick, you probably didn't see it. And now we can preview this. And this gives us our example UML of the code that we wrote here. Let's this one here. Okay, so here we have this. Let me just get rid of that. And we can have a preview. So essentially, here's our code, and here's our preview. So straightforward in order to be able to generate UML from our C# code. And just to review what we want to do and why we're doing this. First thing we want to be able to do, we'll be able to look at designs or create our own designs and then describe them using the UML. And we could do this using PlantUML. Then we write our code based on examining our designs, or we look at the UML designs that come with the design patterns, or any other design that we receive in UML. We write our code, and then we're interested in saying, well, how close is this code to the actual design? Well, then we can actually automatically generate the code using PlantUML, and then we can generate a diagram from that PlantUML, and we can compare it with the original. So that's the plan, and it looks really well. It's a fairly straightforward process, and I'd certainly recommend that you do this. You will need to do this as part of your assignments, of course, and also with your final exam. So I hope this has helped you get into creating UML diagrams in a nice, easy way using PlantUML. Thank you very much for watching.